So I'm starting off my February makes with a week off work where I'm just having a sewcation. So I'm going to be making 3 different blouses. I'm going to try and production line them as much as possible. And this is going to be the first blouse. This is on my make 9 every year since I bought this pattern a couple of years ago. It's Leroy Weldon's 8794, and I've adjusted this pattern because I'm not a 36-inch bust. And I'm making B, which is the sort of simplest version with just the blouse with the collar and the cuffs and none of the ruffles or the pleats or the fancy frilly neck thing. So yes, I'm making B, and I'm going to use this cotton, which is from DIY or Die, and I love it. And the other 2 blouses I'll be making on my production line are from this new Look 6483 pattern. It's a sort of basic shell top, and I've cut them all out, they're ready to go. And these are both fabrics I got from a charity shop. They're basically the same in 2 different colours, and I'm just going to make the same top in 2 different colours. So the view I'm making is B, and it's got these vents in the hem. It's the sleeveless version, so it's got this sort of classic crew style round neckline, and I will be adding a ruffle around the top on both versions. And I think that's the only alteration I'm going to make, but I have made this before. I think I made E from a scrap of fabric that I have, and I needed to take some fabric out of the top, so I've refit that with my old top and made the adjustments. This is an hour easy pattern, but it will take me longer because of this ruffle, and I think because I'm just winging it really. Once the 3 fabrics were cut out, the curves have been stay stitched and the interfacings have been ironed on, I began by sewing the button stand onto the blouse. Then I stitched the darts and the shoulder seams on my shell tops and gathered the fronts and backs to the blouse yoke. I then sewed my side seams with a long stitch, as this would definitely be unpicked after the fitting. This is because I like to flat insert my sleeves. So I've reached a fitting point on this blouse and I'm just trying it on. I will probably not use this button placement because I feel like I need to have one on this red stripe instead of this red stripe if I want one in the middle of the bust. And I feel like this one is too low. I think it needs to be slightly higher. But other than that, I think it's good. I am having some excess here, but I think that's because there is no bust darts, there's no suppression in the bust. It's all gathered up onto the yoke. So I think because of that it will be a bit looser, and it is supposed to be like a casual little 60s blouse based on the pattern. It's sort of youthful and girly and fun. So I'm okay with it being a bit baggy here because then it will allow as well movement. In the back I think the yoke looks really neat, and I just wish that I'd got the pattern matching slightly better. Overall I really like it. I'm not going to make any more adjustments. I think this is good. So this is the fitting stage of the shell top, and I've made this pattern before but a different neckline, and I found that I had too much room in the armhole but not like across the chest, so I couldn't just whip out a section here. So I sort of made a dart here that I transferred into the bust dart, which seems to have fixed that problem. I don't feel like I've got too much room here, and I have noticed with this view that it's almost like the straps are just too wide at the top here, the shoulder seams. They're coming very much off the shoulder, so if this is just under a centimetre, it'll come to this yellow stripe, and I don't think that's a good finishing point, especially because I'm wearing this turtleneck top underneath. I can feel where a shoulder seam should be, so I've sort of traced that on with the pins so I can put that onto the pattern piece. I also don't like the length, it's super duper long. When I made this before, I made it from a scrap of fabric that I didn't have enough to do the full length pattern, so that's more of like a crop top, whereas this it's looking very tabardy. So it's probably the shape as well, but the length is making it look like I'm going to go and do some cleaning when that's not the purpose of this. I would love a cleaning tabard though. So I'm going to take it up to, I think, if I just shuffle that around. So I think I'm going to take it up to here so that I can wear it tucked into high-waisted skirts, and I can wear it untucked with like high-waisted jeans and slacks in a sort of casual way. I'm also going to add a sort of neck ruffle collar so it will be a bit taller, and it's going to be super cute. So once I had made the adjustments to my shell top pattern and the fabric pieces, I constructed the collar for my blouse. This is a flat Peter Pan shaped collar, so all it required is for the two collar pieces to be sewn together on the edge. The underside of the collar is then sewn right sides together with the blouse neckline to the centre front mark. The button stand is then sewn together at the neckline and turned through to hide the collar stitching, and the rest of the collar is turned under and sewn inside by hand with a simple ladder stitch. As I have now finished the blouse neckline, I must finish the shell top necklines too. I'm on a production line. I calculated twice the length of the neckline and made a ruffle to this measurement. For a professional look, I finished the edges of my facings and centre back seam with an overlocker. Next, I gathered my ruffle and I pinned it between the facing and the main body pieces and then sewed the necklines all together. Next, I sewed the armhole facing to the main body and bagged this area out. Once this was turned through, I just ladder stitched the opening together at the shoulder seam on the inside. So I've just done my first bound opening for the sleeve. It needs a very, very good press, but it will open up like this and then it will attach to the cuff. So on the inside it looks like this with the self-binding that I made, and then at the top there is a small dart and then the bias binding is sewn closed so that it will stay like this once the cuff is attached. The cuff vent is made by cutting the sleeve at the indicated point. Then the self-bias binding is pinned and sewn to the slit. It's then pressed to the other side and hand stitched down. I've used a ladder stitch here, but whichever discreet stitch you like. Once the cuff vent is finished, the sleeve needs gather stitches to the top, because although this isn't a puff sleeve, the cap is made slightly larger so that there is more wiggle room and comfort in the sleeve head. This is then pinned and sewn into the sleeve head. I did this first on my regular machine, and then I overlocked the seam allowances together for a professional finish. I then put the blouse to one side and I moved on to my check shell tops. The side seam is sewn all in one, with the facing sewn together at the same time. This means that it's very smooth and it looks beautiful. And then I moved on to the side seam on my check blouse. I sewed this first on my regular sewing machine with a straight stitch, and then I sealed the edges with my overlocker. As I decided to shorten the shell top, I thought the easiest way to do this would just be to mark a line, and because this was a check, I did just follow the check of the pattern. I didn't actually use a pencil or anything like that, and I just whipped it off with the overlocker. The next thing I did was to sew down the pleats on my check blouse cuff. Then I assembled the cuff on my regular sewing machine. This is on an interfaced piece and they're 2 layers sewn together. Then I sewed one layer of the cuff to the blouse and the other layer was turned and pressed over and hand sewn in place. We're getting very close to the finish line. The check shell tops were finished by pressing over the seam allowance and top stitching in place. The check blouse is finished in a similar way. I've already sewn together the button stand at the hem and turned it through, and then I hand stitched the other side of the button stand down. I top stitched this in place. I did overlock it and I don't know why I don't have a clip of that, but rest assured it is neat and overlocked and beautiful on the inside. The final step for the blouse was to sew on the buttonholes. I don't really usually have such a problem with buttonholes, but this time I think because of the check pattern I was very cautious of things pattern matching across the centre front, so I took my time and went nice and slowly. I sewed on my buttons by hand. I don't really understand how to do it on the machine and I'm worried I'm just going to sew through the button and break my needle and break my machine and everything will be ruined. And here we are, my dream check blouse. I adore this piece. I've already worn it a couple of times. It goes really well with jeans and with pinafore dresses and skirts, and I'm really excited to wear it with maybe some dungarees in a sort of 60s country style. Look at me admiring those button cuffs. I properly learned how to do a button cuff and I was so excited about it. I've done yokes a couple of times and I was pleased to be able to do that skill again. This is the first of my check shell tops and it's super cute. I really love it and I can't wait to wear it with all sorts of outfits, with high-waisted jeans, tucked into smart skirts, if we ever get to leave the house again. It's a simple little top and I'm really pleased with it. I really like the ruffle neckline and I am not too bothered about the fact that the shoulders are a bit too wide on the back. I think that'll do. This is the other colour and it has the same issue on the back, but I think it looks really cute, tucked in and untucked. Then I picked up where I left off with this bicycle print pyjama top from last month. Here I am sewing the sleeve into the armhole and overlocking the seam allowance together. I'm really into a flat insertion of a sleeve because you can finish it so neatly like this. Once the sleeve is inserted, I'm sewing the side seams together from the cuff point to the hem, all in one, and then overlocking the seam allowance together again. Then I'm sewing the cuff to the sleeve. This is done differently to my red check blouse because this is sewn flat, whereas the other cuff was constructed before being attached. I quite like making two similar things at the same or similar time because you can see how different things were sewn and which one you prefer. Next I'm sewing the sides of the cuffs together. I think I do prefer it this way, but I can see why the other blouse was done in the other way because of the curve of the cuff. The next thing to do is to finish the hem. So on one side I'm overlocking the edge and then I turn the button stand and facing back on itself and sew that together at the hem, turn it around and press it, and then top stitch the rest of the hem down in place. Then I inserted the buttonholes with the 4-step buttonhole stitch. I prefer to use this method rather than one of those complicated buttons. I think it's supposed to be easier where you put the button on and it calculates it for you. I can't be bothered with newfangled technology, I'm secretly ancient, so I would rather draw it on with a chalk pencil, do a 4-step buttonhole and be done with it. I also did 2 buttonholes on the cuffs, then I sewed the buttons on by hand with a needle and thread. So this is the finished pyjama top blouse pattern. I really like this, it's a really comfortable fit. I like the collar, I think it's really cute. I think the 2-button cuff is very classic and I can't wait to make the matching pyjama bottoms, and I will see you in a future video because I have already made them.